Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Freewheelin' Time, a memoir of Greenwich Village in the 60s, by Suze Rotolo, narrated by Christina Delaine. Who are we, if not a combination of experiences, information, books we have read, things imagined? Each life is an encyclopedia, a library, an inventory of objects, a series of styles, and everything can be constantly reshuffled and reordered in every conceivable way. Italo Calvino, 6 Memos for the Next Millennium. Backstory. I met Bob Dylan in 1961 when I was 17 years old and he was 20. This book is a memoir of my life as it intertwined with his during the formative years of the 1960s. I've always had trouble talking or reminiscing about the 1960s because of my place close to Dylan, the mover and shaper of the culture of that era. The kind of adulation and scrutiny he received made that conversation awkward for me. He became the elephant in the room of my life. I am private by nature, and my instinct was to protect my privacy, and consequently his. I was writing a bit before we met. Poems, little stories, observations, and I kept at it while I was with him. The writing served the same purpose as the sketchbooks I kept, except that these were verbal drawings. Memory. It isn't you, baby. It's me and my ghost, and your Holy Ghost. There is a saying about one's past catching up with them. Mine not only did that, it overran the present. So tomorrow, when the future takes hold, I'll be sitting in the background with the surrealists. Though I no longer remember what triggered those thoughts, recorded in January 1963, reading them in the present gives me an eerie feeling of prescience. In so many ways, my past with Bob Dylan has always been a presence, a parallel life alongside my own, no matter where I am, whom I'm with, or what I'm doing. Dylan's public, his fans and followers, create him in their own image. They expect him to be who they interpret him to be. The very mention of his name invokes his myth and unleashes an insurmountable amount of minutiae about the meaning of every word he ever uttered, wrote, or sang. As Bob Dylan's fame grew so far out of bounds, I felt I had secrets to keep. Though I kept my silence, I didn't relish being the custodian of such things. Time passes, and the weight of secrets dissipates. Articles are written, and biographies are churned out that trigger memories only because they are often far from the reality I knew. They tend to be lackluster yet fascinating in their fantasy. I acknowledge that memory is a fickle beast. Fragments of stories stride in and out. Some leave traces, while others do not. Secrets remain. Their traces go deep, and with all due respect, I keep them with my own. The only claim I make for writing a memoir of that time is that it may not be factual, but it is true. In these times, seeing Bob Dylan's life and work and the people he was close to documented or fictionalized on film, on display in museum exhibits and other commemorations in all categories, only intensifies the feeling I have of possessing a parallel life. It is an odd sensation to see myself on the screen, under glass, and written about in books, forever enshrined and entombed alongside the legend of Dylan. When I look at the pictures and hear the songs, I also see and hear the story behind them. A still photograph morphs into a home movie, and a scrawl on a page evokes a scene in a room or on a street. I hear a laugh coming from somewhere off to the side. It has taken me many years to allow my parallel lives to converge, but there will always be a space between the image and the reality, because ghosts live there, and they cannot be contained under glass. Over time, I have learned to be more at ease with the holy fascination people have with Bob Dylan. A song, a poem, a book, a film, an exhibit are simply representations of a period, a place, a person. And because memory is the joker in the deck, I try not to take the representations of the past too seriously. Life goes on for those who live it in the present. Nostalgia, cheap or otherwise, is always costly. I see history as a reliquary, a container where relics are kept and displayed for contemplation. So much has been written about the 60s that the more distant those years become, the more mythic the tales and the time seem to be. Facts and statistics are pliable. Truth and accuracy are truly Rashomon-like. Each story is true from the teller's perspective. The weight shifts. My decision to add my relics was not an easy one. Hindsight meddles with memory after all, so the best I can do in writing about those long-ago years is to try to make them recognizable. The stories I tell are about my place within that time, and about the early years that made me who I was when I migrated from Queens, New York to Greenwich Village. The backstory has to be considered. Where my family came from, who they were, and all the other bits and pieces that make a person whole. I reminisce to the best of my ability. Since I was born in one of the boroughs of New York City, the concept of coming to the city to find or lose oneself doesn't apply. But it was to Greenwich Village that people like me went. People who knew in their souls that they didn't belong where they came from. I was drawn to the village with its history of Bohemia, where the writers I was reading and the artists I was looking at had lived or passed through. Their spirits led the way, showed me the road, and named the place. I got on the subway. The 1960s were an amazing time, an eventful time of protest and rebellion. An entire generation had permission to drink alcohol and die in a war at 18, but it had no voting voice until the age of 21. Upheaval was inevitable. Talk made music, and music made talk. Action was in the civil rights marches, marches against the bomb, and marches against an escalating war in Vietnam. It was a march out of a time, too. Out of the constricted and rigid morality of the 1950s. The beats had already cracked the facade, and we, the next generation, broke through it. Traveling with the past within us, we were ready to roll into the future. It has now become a historical time made up of many personal stories, songs, and sidebars. There are many reliquaries from that era in American life. This is mine. Part 1. Preamble. Love. Excitement, anticipation, big joy, big bang, big bliss, big white hot sizzle in the gut. A person in love appears perfectly normal within his or her own parameters of normal. Nothing seems out of the ordinary, other than a noticeable shift to a lighter mood. But the inner personality is ecstatic, jumping about, pumping the air with unrestrained happiness, shouting big gusts of glee. Portrait. In the 1960s, Bobby wore a black corduroy cap, with the snap on the brim undone, over his head of curly khaki-colored hair. His clothes were sloppy and didn't fit his body well. He wore shirts in drab colors, chinos, and chunky boots, which later gave over to slimmer-fitting jeans and cowboy boots. I slit the bottom seams on his jeans and sewed in an inverted U from an older pair so they would slide over his boots. He is wearing them on the cover of the Another Side of Bob Dylan album. My solution was a precursor of the bell-bottoms that came on the market not too long afterward. He had baby fat, and Dave Van Ronk, already a well-known folk musician dubbed the Mayor of McDougal Street, loved to tease him about the way he looked. As a folk singer, he advised, Bob had to develop and present an image to the outside world, his future public. Such things might have been talked about in jest, but in truth they were taken quite seriously. Much time was spent in front of the mirror trying on one wrinkled article of clothing after another, until it all came together to look as if Bob had just gotten up and thrown something on. Image meant everything. Folk music was taking hold of a generation, and it was important to get it right, including the look. Be authentic, be cool, and have something to say. That might seem naive in comparison with the commercial sophistication and cynicism of today, but back then it was daring, underground, and revolutionary. We believed we could change perceptions and politics and the social order of things. We had something to say, and believed that the times would definitely change. Bobby had an impish charm that older women found endearing, though my mother was immune. He was aware of it, and used it when he could. But in general, he was shy around people. He had a habit of pumping the air with his knees, a kind of marching in place, whether standing or sitting, all jumpy. On stage, he did it in time to the music. He looked good, despite his floppy clothes. He had a natural charisma, and people paid attention to him. At the height of his Woody Guthrie phase, he talked through his teeth, and when he laughed, he would toss back his head and make a cracking ha-ha sound or a small ha with fingers covering his mouth. His walk was a lurch in slow motion. He had a touch of arrogance, a good dose of paranoia, and a wonderful sense of the absurd. It was very important to him at the time to write as he spoke, writin' like speech without having any punctuation or to write out the word to. We got on really well, though neither one of us had any skin growing over our nerve endings. We were both overly sensitive and needed shelter from the storm. But Bobby was also tough and focused, and he had a healthy ego. The additional ingredients protected the intense sensitivity. As an artist, he had what it took to become a success. We hadn't been together long when we went to Philadelphia with Dave Van Ronk and his wife Terry Thal for a gig she had booked for the two of them at a coffee house. When Bobby got up on the stage, he stood straight with his head slightly back and his eyes nowhere, and began to sing Dink Song, a traditional ballad I had heard sung before by others. I watched him as he sang. If I had wings like Nora's dove, I'd fly across the river to the one I love. Fare thee well, oh honey, fare thee well. He started slow, building the rhythm on his guitar. Something about him caught my full attention. He pushed out the lyrics as he hit the strings with a steady, accelerating drum-like beat. The audience slowed their chattering. He stilled the room. It was as though I had never heard the song before. He stilled my room, for sure. In those early years, Bob Dylan was a painter searching for his palette. He had in mind the pictures he wanted to paint. He just needed to find the right color mix to get him there. He savored all that was put before him, dabbing his brush here and there, testing, adding new layers, and scraping old ones away until he got what he wanted. He would delve into ideas, latch onto them with incredible intensity, and deliberate their validity. He had an uncanny ability to complicate the obvious and sanctify the banal, just like a poet. Some hated that about him, because they felt he was putting them on, scrambling their brains, which he was. It was his way of examining and investigating what was on his mind. It worked for me, even when he made me nuts at times, because I like to ponder other possibilities too, to find the bit that made a thing that was smooth suddenly produce a bump. One evening we went to Emilio's on 6th Avenue and Bleecker Street. a restaurant that was a
Sample complete. Ready to continue?